This isn't an image of the universe. It's a map of everyone Epstein knew.
Weekend resignation coming out of MIT's prestigious media lab today.
Lawyers, politicians, businessmen, and academics.
The journal also reports that Chomsky and Botstein both said they met Epstein multiple times after he was already a registered sex offender to discuss political and academic matters.
This is weird to me because 18-year-old Epstein was enrolled at a low-level college and ended up dropping out.
The director is stepping down amid controversy over financial ties to Jeffrey Epstein.
He wasn't some genius kid whose parents sent him to an Ivy.
Epstein reportedly hoped to see the human race with his DNA. He reportedly planned to impregnate 20 women at a time at his ranch in New Mexico.
This after he admitted to taking $525,000 for the lab, including an additional $1.2 million for personal investments.
So I started looking, and what I found was about way more than money or academic grants.
Epstein spent his final days facing sex trafficking charges. He took his life last month in a Manhattan jail.
To start off, there was this symposium called the Common Sense Symposium. It was held in 2002 in the US Virgin Islands, and it had the best AI scientists at the time. At the center of it is this guy named Marvin Minsky. Now he's considered one of the fathers of AI. And most discussions centered around this paper written by one of Minsky's students called Why AI Failed. This whole problem was really important because so far, not even the smartest people in the world could develop an AI with common sense that would behave or even respond a way a human would. Every scientist in the symposium had his own theory for why AI failed, and nobody seemed to agree on anything except after the mention of this one novel called The Diamond Age. In this novel, children are taught by a magical book that would tell them stories and respond back to their questions. And AI scientists had this vision that this would be the AI of the future. This moment is one of the defining moments that gave birth to the world of AI as we know it. And I'll tell you, these scientists took this vision very seriously. The top two scientists actually developing a database for training an AI model, Push Singh and Chris McKinstry, both committed suicide from the stress. Each thought they would be this seminal figure in history with an invention that would change the world as we know it. Both of them were very successful. One of them even accepted a faculty position at MIT right before committing suicide. Epstein seemed really interested in the AI problem at a time no one else did. One of the attendants said, "I seem to remember that Epstein provided lavish resources, including using a private plane to get us to the location. Jeffrey popped in and out the whole time, and I think had some private conversations with some of the scientists." When you try to understand Epstein's obsession with science, the basic answer most people will give you is that it's just about the money. Scientists need money for research, and Epstein wants to fix his reputation. That's only partially true. It's true that Epstein was incredible at finding and funding world-changing research. He was an early silent architect of the crypto world. He funded the Digital Currency Initiative at MIT, the place that would create the technology that would be used to build Bitcoin. He was also an early investor in Coinbase and Blockstream. Again, this was as far back as the early 2000s when Bitcoin was just launched, trading under $0.1 per Bitcoin. This pattern of behavior shows up across so many universities and in many different fields. Epstein donated $9 million to Harvard, including a $6.5 million gift to Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics. Epstein continued visiting Harvard even after his sex trafficking convictions. In 2018 alone, he visited more than 40 times. He was there so often that he had his own office there. Then there was Epstein's donations to MIT. He donated more than $500,000 to the MIT Media Lab and another $250,000 to an engineering professor named Seth Lloyd. Both gifts also came after his conviction. He also gave a $50,000 gift to Stanford's physics department, $210,000 to Columbia, $125,000 to Bard College, and more, including the University of Tennessee, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and even Edinburgh. There's so much more that it's not even worth listing them all because it would take too long. But in my research, one place in particular kept popping up so frequently, the MIT Media Lab. This lab is really interesting because it doesn't really function like a normal research institution. It works more like a subscription service. Companies and states don't donate or give grants. They become members. You pay a minimum annual fee of $250,000, and the more you pay, the more perks that you get. This structure makes it more free to do whatever it wants compared to regular university labs. Regular university programs have to disclose their funding, but if your funding is not really funding, it's more like a subscription. If falls under the definition of a corporate contract, and those, according to the law, are confidential. So hypothetically, if you're rich enough and you want to steer research in a certain direction and you don't want anyone protesting, you can just go to this lab. And this isn't me being unfair to the MIT Media Lab. There are emails from the files that suggest an unspoken truth that people knew the lab was being exploited, like this email. Hi Jeffrey, at MIT Media Lab, who's the best AI-related person for me to talk to that you sponsored? This will help me get into a headline. Epstein wasn't the only person to recognize that. It seems that a lot of other large institutions and even countries caught on to this, especially those two countries on the screen. For context, Saudi Arabia has a bunch of contracts between its government-owned oil giant Aramco and MIT. Israel takes this a step further, and it's not even a government-owned entity, it's the government itself fostering defense deals with MIT. In fact, Israel was the only military in the world that has directly funded MIT under its own name. This is all public since MIT is required to disclose its donations. In the past 2 years, there have been protests at MIT because of funding from those two particular countries and their human rights abuses. There was even a student union vote where the majority voted to cut funding from the Israeli military, which MIT eventually did, which is why the MIT Media Lab keeps popping up so often, because you can circumvent all of this and fund whatever you want anonymously. So at this point in my research, I'm like, okay, maybe the basic answer is the entire story. It's just a rich guy funding research to launder his reputation and make more money. But then I stumble on this guy, David Galanter, CSEL professor. Not only did this guy not get paid, he's currently actively destroying his own reputation by doubling down on defending Epstein. He said he was, quote, glad he recommended a small blonde from his class to Epstein. By the way, in all of his interviews, you see him wearing one glove on one hand. This is because when he was younger, he received a package from Ted Kaczynski, and now he only has one finger on his right hand. Unrelated to the video, but I just thought it was interesting to bring up. Another weird example I found was none other than the Noam Chomsky. When reporters asked him about his connections to Epstein, he responded with lines like, none of your business. Chomsky was well aware of Epstein's crimes. He even advised him on how to deal with media scrutiny covering his crimes. Some of the documents read, Noam, I'd love your advice on how to handle my putrid press. Do I have someone write an op-ed, defend myself? Noam Chomsky responds, what the vultures dearly want is public response, which then provides a public opening for an onslaught of venomous attacks. He was also insistent on having Epstein on his family trust, or Epstein's right-hand man on his family trust, and consistently involved Epstein in the business of his will. So much so that it caused a rupture in the relationship between him and his children. Imagine being so insistent on having Epstein managing your will to the point it causes a fallout between you and your children. I mean, this guy spent decades talking about power and challenging authority just to destroy it all on his deathbed at 97 years old.
Control and domination. That's the goal of all power systems. They can be resisted, and should be.
To find out why, I looked at the MIT Media Lab again. Other donors, or subscribers if you will, had a clear outcome for donating, like Saudi Arabia and Israel. What did Epstein have to make these scientists so invested in him? And the answer is a lot. Epstein had big plans for humanity. He had this huge ranch in New Mexico in the middle of nowhere. It had completely decked out medical facilities, and he built it planning to mass impregnate women. He had this huge plan to create a new human race from his DNA. He was consulting with top geneticists on how to automate the whole process. If this sounds familiar, yes, this is transhumanism, the same stuff that this guy, Peter Thiel, believes in.
You would prefer the human race to endure, right? You're hesitating.
Yeah, well,
yes?
I don't know. I would,
this is a long hesitation. This is a long hesitation.
There's so many questions implicit
Should
in this.
the human race survive?
He was also obsessed with the genetics that makes people great. He was obsessed with the repository for germinal choice, aka the Nobel Prize sperm bank. Yes, that's an actual thing. He was even sending 23andMe kits to Noam Chomsky and Woody Allen. Like, dude, that's so creepy. Imagine having this friend that's sending you DNA test kits to fill up. If some of this transhumanism stuff sounds a bit like eugenics, that's because it is. The files are riddled with weird comments about race, IQ, and a weird obsession with blue eyes, like these comments about blue-eyed scientists, the intelligence of blue-eyed kids, the relationship between blue eyes and your handshake. And there's just so much more that I can't even cover in this video. But Epstein's interest in transhumanism is different from other billionaires. The real reason he was interested in it is because he was terrified of death and spent millions trying to cheat it. He funded research to map the human brain because he believed that if you could map the brain, you could eventually upload a consciousness into a machine. He paid for personalized longevity studies and genetic sequencing to identify how to reverse his age, and as a last resort, he ordered people to cryogenically freeze his head so that people can bring him back in the future. He was also obsessed with gravity. He spent millions flying Nobel Prize winners to his island to discuss the physics of gravity. He believed if he understood gravity, that would unlock the key to interstellar travel. He famously told associates that he wanted to leave the Earth and live forever in the stars. So, to answer the question that we started with, these scientists weren't neutral observers, and they weren't his workers. They weren't just getting paid. They clearly liked the guy. When you know someone who will just call up a Norwegian diplomat while you guys are discussing the Oslo Accords, or who will just give you his apartment to stay over for your vacation, or who will take time out of his day to give you relationship advice, or who will listen to your most ridiculous ideas and actually fund them, you might be willing to sacrifice a little bit of your reputation to defend that guy. But there's one last reason, more important than money or friendship, that made Epstein so close to academia: intelligence. If we want to know why Epstein got rich so quickly, you have to know he was really good at two things. He understood systems and he was good at connecting with people. But this profile isn't just valuable for getting rich, it's really good for intelligence. His profile is actually similar to that of someone else, Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father.
American business ethics do not exist.
He was a business giant in the publishing world, and he owned multiple newspapers. He even had a publishing company that later ended up in a merger, eventually creating McGraw-Hill, a company that manufactures almost all your textbooks. This made him really valuable in intelligence circles, so much so that he became a triple agent for the US, UK, and Israel. This isn't some conspiracy theory. If you go to Wikipedia, if you go to established media, that's a well-recorded fact. And from the files, there is speculation that Epstein himself, with his profile and connections to academia, might have had intelligence connections. This goes back decades. He even emailed Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, to explicitly tell people that he doesn't work for Mossad. So the question we started out with, why would world-class academics involve themselves with such a terrible character? The answer, as uncomfortable as it is actually pretty mundane. People at the top are not superhuman. They're just regular people, and they are as susceptible to power as anyone else. They need to get paid. They need emotional validation. They struggle with women. They like when people make them feel smart. They're not particularly weaknesses of terrible people, they're weaknesses of humans. Same desires for validation, connection, and relevance that drives everyone else. Epstein wasn't a uniquely evil individual, he just understood that about people and he used it to his advantage.